it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer, really, standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes, and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. And we have a great show coming up tonight. Ron Felber is our guest, and he's going to be talking about his book, The Mojave Incident, and it's inspired by a chilling story of alien abduction. Now, it's possible in the second hour that we may have a surprise guest. I'm not really sure. I'm waiting to get a text from someone is what is happening here. News is going to be coming up with Alejandro Rojas in a few minutes. Before that, I want to talk about our support platform. I sent out 2 emails to everyone that supports the show, and it got about a 50% open rate, which I guess is pretty high for a mass mailing, but pretty low when it comes to all the supporters. So a number of people do not have a clue that Joyride has gone away, and there's a new platform. I'm getting emails every day, hey, it's not working. So the reason it's not working is you have to re-sign up, and it's all through our website, podcastufo.com. Click on Support the Show. All the information is there under all the links. We have an RSS feed for your media player as well. So everything's done in-house, and that's thanks to Sam Bosell, who helped out with that. So how that works, if you're new to the show, is the first hour as a podcast is free on iTunes, on our website, on Stitcher, and all that. The second hour is by subscription only, and that's through supporting the show. You'll get to log in, and complete full shows will be right there, including the archives. And we're also live, free to anyone that wants to listen on the Dark Matter Digital Radio every Wednesday at 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We do have one issue that cannot be resolved as of yet, but I do have posts out there and forums for support, and that is Safari. If you own an iPad or a Mac, Safari is not playing our shows for some reason. It's playing for about a minute and then repeating. So we're working on that, trying to figure out what's going on. Now, last week, I mentioned that if there was a graphic designer out there that I needed help with the T-shirt and of the banner on my website, well, let me tell you, I got no less than 13, I counted them, 13 graphic designers contacted me willing to do the work. The first one was Diane, and she made the banner for our website, which is up there right now. Check it out. She did a very nice job. We're going to have a bunch of people throw their designs into the ring for a T-shirt contest, and I think I'm going to have it up on our website and have you, the listener, vote for our T-shirt graphics. How does that sound? All right, that's enough of me, and we are bringing in Alejandro Rojas for the news. What's going on, Alejandro?
UFOs are what's going on, buddy. They're here, they're there, they're everywhere, but then again, perhaps they are nowhere.
Wow. That really could be, you know.
Yeah.
You know,
it's entirely possible.
It's something I bring up on the show a number of times. I said it, and probably people are tired of hearing it, but we may have totally the wrong idea with what we are seeing.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Entirely.
Something we never even thought of. It's possible.
Yeah, in fact, that's what I always say. Well, my girlfriend will get mad because she'll say, well, you believe they're aliens, right? And I'll be like, I don't know, okay? Because, you know, when it comes to science, most of the time we discover stuff we didn't expect to be there at all, you know?
Like when dark matter, dark energy.
We don't even know what dark matter or dark energy is. We're clueless. So it's like, you know, we'll have an idea, oh, this is what it's probably like there. And then we check it out, and it's like, oh, my gosh, it's completely different. So that's science. So who knows? You could be right. I agree with you 200%.
So, hey, by the way, have you seen the movie The Martian?
I haven't, and I so much want to see it. Oh, I was so bummed. Last month, I was invited to go to the press conference with Ridley Scott at NASA, a NASA facility in California, to talk about it. But I couldn't go. It's because I do these Huffington Post science blogs, and they invite me for these movies and stuff sometimes. And I couldn't go, and I've been looking forward to this movie for so long. Hopefully I'll be able to catch it this weekend.
Yeah, I expect I'm going to go see it tomorrow. Hopefully.
You haven't seen it?
I haven't seen it. My son and I are probably going to go catch it tomorrow night.
Yeah, cool.
Looks really good, though, doesn't it?
It looks awesome, and the reviews are great, so I'm really, really excited about it.
I know. It's making like, I don't know, $70 million or something so far?
Yeah, at least.
Amazing.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we'll have to check that out. But this is something cool. Speaking of cool, so we're going to have a Open Minds Facebook group soon.
Oh, you don't... Open Minds does not have a Facebook page right now. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do. We have a Facebook page.
Oh, this is something different.
A Facebook group.
Group.
You know, like UFO updates. That's a discussion group.
Right.
What's another? World UFO Day is a discussion group. So a group's different because a group you join and you get more updates about what's going on in there, and it's all about discussions. What's hard is they have to be admins like a forum. Like this is even a closed group because you could get booted. Because as everybody knows, you know, the internet is full of people just being total jerk-offs.
Trolls.
Yeah, trolls, we call them. Or jerk-offs. I like calling them jerk-offs. But so these admins for this MUFON group are just like specialists at watching over and making sure that, you know, people are behaving themselves, which is really cool because a lot of great discourse goes on. People agreeing and disagreeing on things, you know, looking into sightings and stuff, but being very civil. So MUFON decided they can't handle having a Facebook page and a group. So I've talked to them, and they've decided, you know, we'll make it an Open Minds group then. So in about a week, I'll give you a status update. But we should, in the next few days, have that up. So if people want a Facebook, you know, discussion kind of area that's safe from jerk-offs, a.k.a. trolls, then I'm really excited we're going to have something like that soon.
Is that actually going to say like Open Minds /MUFON, or is it just totally
Open Minds?
And you're going to try to you're going to try to migrate some of the users over?
Yeah, we're going to try to migrate the users over. I don't know exactly how we're going to do it, but we might be able to change the name or something. But yeah, we're going to work on something like that.
Great.
Yeah, pretty cool.
I'll have to get involved.
To see you there.
Oh, yes.
You will.
Yes.
Yeah, because if anybody messes with Martin, you know, it's like, we'll boot the jerk-off.
That's right.
Instant jerk-off status if you mess with Martin. That's pretty good, huh?
All right. I feel safe already.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what else is happening in the news?
Well, some of the UFO news we'll be talking about in that group as soon as we get that rolling is Hillary Clinton. This is kind of cool. You might have seen this if you're a Coast to Coast fan. They actually posted this story of mine on the front page. They used to post more of our stories, but they haven't lately. So I'm very happy and thankful that they did this one. But other people had been talking about this, so I was kind of late to the scene writing about this, to be honest. Although the media didn't pick up on this one. So this is about Hillary. Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta. I'm sure you've talked about him on your show before. But he tweeted another UFO tweet. He's done this before. Last time he did it was in February. You might remember. I'm sure we talked about it. You probably had talked about it with other people on your show. But he tweeted, finally, my biggest failure of 2014, once again, not securing the disclosure of the UFO files. And he hashtags it, the truth is out there. He's a big X-Files fan, and, you know, that's been known for a long time. But his latest tweet didn't get so much media attention. But this one said, great interview, Lena Dunham. But Lena asked her about aliens next time. Hashtag truth is out there, and he CC'd at Hillary Clinton. Lena Dunham, people might know, is the girl on Girls. Now, she's a writer and producer. She created the show. She also takes her clothes off a lot on the show. I don't know.
Oh, yes. Now I know who she is.
Yeah, I don't know why she does that, though, to be honest. It's like if I had a show, I wouldn't be taking my clothes off on it. But that's just her thing.
She does it because she can.
Yeah, I guess so.
Mm-hmm.
But she's a great writer. Everybody loves her. And she does this new email newsletter called Lenny with one of her co-producer, co-writers on the show, Jenny Connor. And in the first Lenny email was an interview with Hillary. So Podesta's encouraging her to ask Hillary about aliens. Is he joking around? Is he being funny? I don't know what the heck's going on, but people may remember that back in it was early 2000s, I believe, when he did a talk at the National Press Club. It was a press conference that he joined Leslie Kean, who had the Coalition for the Freedom of Information, and he came out and he said, we need to get information out about UFOs. So he's a big UFO proponent. One of the questions I ask in this story is, well, even if someone asked Hillary about UFOs, what would she have to say? And she actually would have to say something. Grant Cameron actually got from the Clinton Library some letters. My girlfriend makes fun of me because I say library.
I thought I heard that.
Yeah, I did. But in these files, and we posted them online in this story, Lawrence Rockefeller, it talks about how he is trying to talk to the president and Hillary about UFOs and getting them to do some sort of investigation into UFOs. And in these letters, it shows that he has been working with Hillary Clinton's office on this topic. So pretty interesting. Lawrence Rockefeller is one of the big Rockefellers. And he passed away, unfortunately, but he was really into UFOs, and he funded some UFO projects.
Yeah, there's still some ongoing.
Well, not from his funding.
Yes.
No.
BLT research.
BLT, but they weren't created for that. They ran through that funding.
Oh.
BLT exists. Chris O'Brien did research using his money. So I don't know. Maybe you could loosely say some of that. But really, BLT's been researching this before and after all of this whole affair.
Well, I did not know that.
Yeah, so BLT now is just one person, Nancy Talbot. Really, the others have passed away. So she's all alone because this... So anyway, so she's never talked about her discussions on UFOs with Lawrence Rockefeller. So we'll see what she has to say. Mother Jones wrote a story not too long ago about Podesta's tweet, and they interviewed Stephen Bassett, and they asked Hillary Clinton's then non-campaign. It was before she officially announced she was running, about UFOs, and they wrote Mother Jones, and they said, our non-campaign has a strict policy of not commenting on extraterrestrial activity, but the truth is out there. So they're being cute. So... Yeah, so this should be cool. Of course, Jimmy Kimmel's asked Clinton and Obama about UFOs. So if she is on the Jimmy Kimmel show, which I'm sure is inevitable, I'm sure he'll ask her about the whole thing.
And I agree 100% with you. She already has an answer lined up.
Yeah, I think she probably does have a response ready to go. That is probably some sort of joke. If it is a joke... which she's not necessarily the best, comedian. Her jokes often do not go across well, but sometimes they do. But if it is a joke, I hope there's a little bit of some kind of stab at Clinton, Bill, for his interest. That'd be cute.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Or
she could
Obama.
fit that in. That's Bill's thing, not mine. That would be a good one, maybe.
Yeah. So what else is happening?
Yeah, otherwise, UFO stories out there. We have a couple written by Roger Marsh, some MUFON stories. And one of those that we posted yesterday is getting a lot of hits, actually. And this is a lady who says she heard some jets on October 1st. She went outside to check it out. And these were jets that were chasing a UFO, a cylindrical type of UFO. So that's kind of a weird story. There's no pictures or videos on this one, but it's just anecdotal. But yeah, that's a pretty interesting story.
I like those stories because I have a friend that lives in Canada. I've mentioned this on my show a couple of times, and he was at a party at his house, and everyone was out on the deck. When he said everyone, like 15 or so people were out on the deck, and they heard these two jets flying, and right in front of them was a disc.
Wow!
And
really?
He said that the next day he looked in the paper. He said there was nothing. And a couple of his friends have spoken about it. But so this does happen. And the thing I mentioned last week when I had John Alexander on the show, I said, what about these people that are in the jets that are chasing these UFOs? You never really hear them talk about it. Mm-hmm. And, you don't. You really don't hear too much of that.
What do you say?
You know what? I can't remember.
Oh, my gosh. You're getting old.
I know. No, it was a whole week, Yeah.
And it's happened, it seems like this sort of thing happens on a regular basis, at least in the Blue Book files. We have the famous 1952 Washington incident, which was actually a flap of incidents that happened in Washington. Right. They talked about it happening in San Diego and other areas at the time. And essentially, the pilots, when they used to talk about it way back then, before 1969, when they closed Blue Book, they used to say, we chased them. They were too fast. I don't know what it was. It was gone by the time I got there, and that's about it, like these kind of cat and mouse games. Now we never hear about it other than these witnesses. So it appears as though possibly this whole cat and mouse kind of game type of stuff still goes on.
Right. Yes. Yep.
How weird is that?
Yeah. Yep. And another friend of mine had a sighting similar to, with two jets. So, yeah. It does really make you wonder. Well, so what's the last story of the day?
All right, the last story quickly here is really cool because I know we've gone a while. But this is in a remote area in Oregon. This is really neat. There's these guys that are doing an off-road motorcycle tour across some remote parts of Oregon. They were camping out, and they saw some weird lights in the sky. In fact, they submitted some pictures, and you can see it here. They said these orange orbs kind of dropped from it. But the pictures are pretty neat. People will have to check these out. And what's really cool is in the first picture, I lightened up the picture, and it's just a really neat effect where you see these lights, and it looks pretty weird. So another cool sighting people are going to have to check out at openminds.tv.
Yes, and all those links to these stories we're talking about will be in our show notes on Podcast UFO. Well, great. Thanks so much.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, and we'll be talking to you next week.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right, hang in, everyone, for this quick little music break. We'll be right back with our guest, Ron Felber.
Hello,
Ron Felber, how are you?
I'm just fine. Is this Martin?
It is, yes. Thank you for joining us. And Ron, this is I guess you're making the rounds. You've been on a couple of other shows lately, and welcome to this show. And you have a book. It's kind of outside of what you have normally written. And let's give the listener, for someone who hasn't heard you, your background, basically. You ran a company. You were a police officer at one time. You did all kinds of things.
I've done all kinds of things. Yeah, I guess so. Really, I went to Georgetown University, and actually when I graduated, it was in the middle of a lot of economic turmoil. So actually I couldn't get a job in business, which is what I wanted. So the police department, as a federal marshal, would pay for graduate school. So I was in the police operations, transporting federal prisoners for about 3 years while I worked on a master's degree. And after that, fortunately, I was able to land a job in business and wound up becoming the CEO of a pretty large company, about $250 million industrial chemical company. And then I got my doctorate in arts and letters, and I've been writing for my entire life.
Wow. So this book that we're going to be talking about tonight, it's quite an incident, or ongoing, or possibly ongoing incident. And the title of your book is called Mojave Incident, and it's inspired by a chilling story of alien abduction. And you have the two main characters in this book that this account is told of. They're anonymous. Is that right? Yes.
We use the name Tom and Elise Gifford, and frankly, the reason is that they have children, and they were just reluctant to come forward at all. As a matter of fact, when I first was introduced to them, it was through a business friend who had played football, college football, with the gentleman, Tom Gifford, in the story, his wife Elise. And he was an all-state football player. Now, he had this experience, this UFO alien abduction experience, sustained for 8 hours conscious, 4 hours that was recovered through retrogressive hypnosis. But by and large, they did not want to talk about this. They went to their parents with it, and they were met with, I guess, empathy, but not necessarily belief. And I think that really made this like a deep, dark secret that they held inside for a long time. And my friend a mutual friend introduced us. The idea was, well, maybe it would be helpful to them to tell their story and get it out, cathartic in some way. And from my standpoint, he knew I was a writer. And at first I said I had no interest in an alien abduction story. But once I heard the story and realized how significant it was, I had no choice but to write it.
Okay. There's a little bit of an issue. The producer of the show, the live runs the live portion, is saying that he believes that your headset may not be connected. Do you have a Mac or a PC?
I have a PC.
Yeah. There is echo. We talked about that earlier, and I'm sorry to the listener for bringing this up during the show. But can you just verify that is, you want to go to Options, Tools, and Audio, and just make sure that headset is connected?
Yeah, I will. And so, all right, very good. I'll do that right now.
Okay. So I'll be, while you're doing that, I'm sure you'll be able to hear me. I'm going to be asking these questions. First of all, you want to make sure that you select the USB mic under the Options and Audio.
Okay.
Audio. So when there's always a little bit of a mystique when someone doesn't come forward and say who they are, and they have a story like this. Do they ever plan on eventually talking about it publicly, say after their kids are through school or anything like that?
Well, that could well be. I have no way of knowing that at this point. But frankly, if you think about it, these are, this was a fellow who was running a construction project management job for a major construction company that's building malls and things of that nature. So that, it's a highly responsible position. And really, I think between that and just the idea of their kid be made fun of or harassed or whatever, they at this stage of the game anyway, just don't want to talk about it that way. But I think what makes this incredibly real is that two major doctors examine them. One is Dr. Bernard Vitone, who is director of the National Center for Psychiatric Disorders in Washington, D.C., and William Annixter from Mountain Psychiatric Center in Asheville, North Carolina. And both, we're really blown away by the story and by the authenticity of these people. Annixter called it the most compelling case of its kind I've ever encountered. Vitone said highly unusual, traumatizing events outside the realm of normal human experience. And actually, Annixter, and these are, very, let's say, understated people. When you say, what do you think happened? He said, when you look at the possibilities, he goes, I believe that what they say happened to them happened. And I feel the same way. So credibility, if you read the story, a lot of it's based on transcripts from either the retrogressive hypnosis sessions or from my interviews with them. But again, these are two people, college graduates both. One is a mother of two kids at the time, third on the way. The husband is has a responsible job. They have a mortgage. They're the backbone of America kind of people. And this is just something they didn't want. This is something they didn't need. And frankly, I'm pretty sure if they were at a crossroads and could decide, do I go down this road or that one, they would not go down this road. They would have preferred it never happened to them. Yeah.
Getting back to your sound, did you figure that out?
Yeah. How are we doing now?
It still sounds basically the same. And so, did you?
I'm on tools. Skype Wi-Fi, but you want to go to options, I think you'd said, right?
Under audio settings, let's see.
I have tools.
Tools. Okay, let me just see one more time. Audio settings. Yeah, options, tools, audio.
All right, audio settings. Here we are, yeah.
And then you select your USB mic.
All right. It says just microphone, and it's on.
It should say the particular microphone.
It says desktop microphone HD3000.
It does say that right now?
Yes. Now maybe it's on. It's sort of to the right of the center. Maybe I want to tone it down a bit.
No. If there should be a drop down, and if it, why don't you tap on it?
There's the drop down, and it says desktop microphone, and then microphone real tech. Maybe I want to.
Are you there? It's not that one. Okay. So for the listening audience, I do apologize for this. We did try to check this out earlier, so there wouldn't be a problem. So hopefully, he's going to figure out to put it back to where the setting was. Any minute now. Meanwhile,
how about now? Is this okay?
That'll work. Whatever happened, you went stealth there for a while, so
yeah.
You're back. Okay, so that's enough. We'll move on with this right now. Can you explain to the listening audience? Tell them the story on how this whole thing came about.
Well, sure. Basically, this would be Tom and Elise Gifford again. I told you their backgrounds somewhat. One is a young mother and basically wanted to, get out. She was in a house with kids and wanted a night out, wanted a small vacation from the children. And the husband, in the meantime, wanted to go hunting. And so there was a reason for that. He had missed a mule deer shot a year before. His father and brother gave him a relentless hard time about it, and he wanted to vindicate himself. what they decided to do was to do both. So they'd go dancing and do a little gambling, listen to some music at a place called Whiskey Pete's near Mid Hills campsite. And after that, he would spend the next day hunting. And that would be a kind of compromise they worked out. So what happened basically was they did go to Whiskey Pete's. When they got to Mid Hills campsite, it was completely sold out. And so they wound up going into the heart of the Mojave Desert, which he was quite familiar with, around dusk. And they made a campfire. They fried up some steaks, had a glass of wine, were looking at the stars, identifying stars. And what happens after that is nothing short of sensational, because basically, maybe I'll read a little bit of this. Tom had said to her, well, this is a double star, and that's why it's so bright. She says, well, if that's a double star, these must be triples, because they're a lot bigger and brighter than that. So basically, they talk about weather balloons, they talk about the possibility of a desert warfare exercise or military exercises, but these things start glowing lights, 9 of them, start flashing signals to one another. They form a configuration on the horizon of a large, sprawling M, and then they're joined by hundreds of others that start dropping down to the desert floor. Now, there are no roads there or anything of that type, but these are rushing towards them, and what's rushing towards them are not the craft, but red eyes, beings with red eyes. So this guy, being a hunter, has a Browning shotgun, and his first response is, I'm going to protect my wife, I'm going to protect myself. And they get telepathic messages. Don't try and do that. Get in the back of the camper. So they go in the back of the camper, and they're sort of monitored there by 2 electrical fields, 2 like stumps of like a holograph.
Now, did this happen right away as soon as they got in the camper?
Yeah, actually, these eyes were rushing towards them, and he was going to fend them off. But the first thing he did then was to go with his wife in the back of the camper. And so, yeah, that didn't take a lot of deliberation. And the wife, Elise, heard it first. She said, don't you hear what they're telling you? If you try to harm them, they'll kill you. And so they go in the back of the camper, sit Indian style, shotgun across his lap, holding each other literally, and watching these gremlin-like beings like roused about the camper. Soon, a huge UFO the size of a football field that domes actually the valley comes over them. 9 illuminated beings, and there are some very good descriptions, and that's what I think is very special about this account, because it's conscious, because they're both together pinching each other literally.
So can we just back up a little bit?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So first of all, they see the stars in a distance, and they make a formation like an M, if I remember right, in
Correct.
the book and all that. And then they see these things dropping, maybe hundreds of them, and
Yes.
they're all heading toward them, and that's before they even saw the domed.
That's correct.
So that
That's
was
correct.
like supposedly off, must have been off in the distance or something. And
Well, actually, what I think happened was the crafts that they saw were other than the large craft, and perhaps miniature versions of the large craft. In other words, these were much smaller units that dropped down from the sky. They seemed to be abandoned. The beings came rushing towards them. They were capped then. Once they were in the camper, they realized they were capped by this huge UFO. And again, I have some really very specific descriptions about all of these things. And then these illuminated beings that are so shiny that they close the curtains, but it does no good. The light start encircling the camper and putting them through some mental gymnastics that are nothing short of torture.
And this was all telepathic?
This was telepathic, absolutely correct, right?
And so were they actually seeing visions, or was this just all like words coming into their their mind?
Words, but not just words, full scenarios where they were really made to relive specific traumatic, some exalting, some horrible experiences in their life. For example, Elise had been molested as a child, and this was something she was reliving. So
now, why on earth would they're trying to traumatize to see how people react? I mean, this is all speculative, of course, but is that what you got out of this?
Absolutely. And by the way, when Elise is hypnotized, she makes it very clear that that's exactly what what the situation was like, because at the end she says that they don't have emotions like we do, and they need us to teach them. They need to understand humans. Now, this is not anything benevolent. This is like a scientific experiment. They're putting them through their paces to see how they react, to see what crying is like, what hysteria is like, what terror is like. And these people are trapped in the back of the camper undergoing these things.
Wow. And how long did this I understand that they possibly went on board and all that, but how long did this last? It sounds like, every second would feel like an hour in a situation like this.
Hours is what they talk about, and actually when they awaken in the morning, they're outside the camper. The fire is run out. The fire is ashed out, and they don't know how they got out of the camper. But that was recovered again through retrogressive hypnosis. But the conscious experience was sustained, in I would say in the area of 6 hours.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long, long time.
Here's a quote, by the way, just to give you a feel for the emotional trauma here. This is from Tom Gifford when he first sees what's going on. When we first saw them dropping from the sky, we thought it was some kind of military maneuver, maybe for Operation Desert Storm, but it was too massive even for that. I mean, there were hundreds of them falling, then rushing toward us. So I kicked out the campfire, grabbed my gun, and ran into the back of the camper with Elise. Then we sat there Indian style, waiting until they came, hundreds of them, pairs of tiny red eyes glowing in the dark around us.
Why didn't they, it seems to me that if I saw I'm just thinking of how I would react, or how I'd think I'd react. I don't know if I would, but if I saw all this happening, I would get in that camper truck, whatever it is, and floor it and head back out of the desert as fast as I could. Did they consider doing that?
Well, they went into the back of the camper because that's what they were instructed to do. But this desert terrain was so rough, and this was the thing that first startled them. How are these things rushing towards them when it's basically cactus and sand and really rough terrain, rocky? So how is this happening? So if you were going to take a truck, you wouldn't be flooring it in the dark.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And now they had hypnosis and more things were uncovered.
Yes.
Basically. But, okay, getting back to their children, it was just them two, but they had kids at home or something like that?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, they left two children, one that was 2 and one that was 4 with their parents who babysat.
Okay. So now those kids are in their 30s?
Yeah, but actually she had another child, became pregnant almost immediately after this experience.
So, but the kids are older, basically.
They have 6 children now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Any hybrids? Just a joke.
Well, I'll tell you, that's a question that certainly one could ask with some credibility.
Let's see. I think we have a question. We have a chat room going. And do you think that dreams can uncover hidden memories? Did they have dreams like...
They had more than dreams. I mean, they had really incredible experiences afterwards that were quite terrifying, where they felt like they were watched constantly. As a matter of fact, when Elise became pregnant, she was convinced they were in the room watching.
Oh.
And one evening, late at night, they hear their son screaming. And this would be a 5-year-old at the time. So they go running into his room, and he's spinning like a top. So the mother, of course, calms him down, hugs him, and they're about to leave, and he said, "Please don't leave." And they say, "Why?" "Because when you leave, the monsters with the red eyes come."
Oh, boy. So did they openly, as the children became, or at least some of them became adults, did they openly talk to them about this whole experience?
I think that my understanding is that they talked to the 2 older ones, but again, they have 4 children that are unaware of this, and that's part of the other issue with anonymity.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
By the way, to get back to the question that I kind of digressed a bit, I'm sorry. Do dreams reveal unconscious experiences? Yeah, I think they do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier when we first started talking that there were 2 different doctors, maybe a psychiatrist, or two people that...
2 medical doctors.
2 medical doctors. Now, did they actually pay to have this?
I did.
You did?
Yep.
And it was that couldn't have been cheap. Was it for the purpose of this book?
Yes, absolutely.
So you were looking at that time to see what kind of credibility, or you wanted to confirm the credibility of these people?
Sure, they took polygraph tests too, and the only reason actually that Elise did and Tom did was because she was pregnant, and that involves electricity, and they were wary of giving a pregnant woman a polygraph test.
And they passed. He passed.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. So let's talk further. What came out after they had the regression hypnotherapy?
Yeah. Really, the book includes a lot of that, and the reason, is because it's so powerful, I think, and if you could have been there, I have to say, and I know you weren't, and you can't be there, but you'd never forget it. So here's a little bit of a piece. Dr. Annixter accepted her answer when she said that it was too unclear for her to articulate. He turned in his seat toward Elise, who sat, her body lax, head tilted to one side, lying on her right shoulder. "Elise, do you have any idea what these beings want, or why they're here?" It was strange watching as Elise sprang up in her chair, suddenly animated and alert. Her voice, rather than soft and emotional, took on a new cadence that was clipped and direct, quite unlike her. "They want to make contact with the population. Tom and I are specimens, imperfect like the human race. When ready to communicate with them face to face, then the world will be too." Her actions, such as edging forward in her chair at the moment, seemed mechanical, as did her voice as she continued. "They have to study our reactions, so they know how to approach us. They don't have emotions like ours, so they need us to teach them. They need to understand humans. Do you have a sense as to who they are and where they come from? There are 5 galaxies. Theirs is the next closest. In order for all 5 galaxies to work together one day, they have to start, and they're starting with us, so we'll be united galaxies. What else do you know?" Annixter asked. "I know where the universe ends." "Is that something you could put into words?" "Our universe ends where theirs begins. Our universe ends when all its matter stops mattering to us and starts mattering to them."
Now, were you... I'm not... and I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but I'm not really big into excerpts being read.
Okay.
But so I'd rather hear more or less first-hand accounts.
Sure.
If you don't mind.
Not
so
at all.
were you in the room when this was?
Of course, yeah.
And so tell me what that was like.
Well, I mean, you could have heard a pin drop because you really felt like these people who were hypnotized and rather almost lethargic, all of a sudden spring to life, and use words and verbiage that you could never imagine them using before. Very precise, very concise, like it wasn't them that was talking.
So that must have been pretty freaky to see.
You could have heard a pin drop.
Yeah. And now was I'm sorry. What do you call the gentleman's name?
Dr. Annixter?
No. The husband and wife.
Oh, Tom and Elise. I'm sorry.
Tom. Okay. Was Tom present during when his wife was being?
Yes.
And vice versa.
They did it separately first, and that was really great because even their recovered memories, linked with one another. And even on the ship, they were taken apart from each other, but they felt like they were together, like telepathically. They felt like they had this bond between them, of course, husband and wife. And then they were brought together, and they were both hypnotized together, and that was equally intriguing.
Were there tapes made of the
videotapes? Yes,
videotapes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. So someday those might come out.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I have those tapes, sure.
Yeah. That kind of reminds me of the Betty and Barney Hill situation where they had audio tapes, but not video
but
tapes.
You know what? This is something, and I think this is significant maybe to your listeners. But, of course, I'm familiar with the Betty and Barney Hill and some of the early UFO things and alien abduction type stories. But what makes this really very unique is the fact that it's sustained, the fact that it's two people, not one, the fact that it's a conscious experience. So the bulk of this, was conscious. And maybe 1/3 of it, or 25% of it, a quarter of it, was recaptured through retrogressive hypnosis. So that you've got a conscious experience where these two people are literally pinching themselves, saying, what do you see? Because even while the saucer is this huge craft is hovering above them, there's another, what they call a searcher, that's combing the desert basin, apparently mining minerals. And this is a place where Alumax, for example, gets exotic metals and whatnot used for laser weaponry, etc. And they could see this, what they called a triangular, craft, combing the desert basin, sucking up material from the desert basin. So it's almost like a veil is lifted or a curtain is lifted for a sustained exposure to another universe, another world, something very, very different from a lot of other stories because it's so complete.
Now, getting back to the tapes, you could actually make them just audio and make those available, I would think. I can't see any harm. No one would be able to pinpoint, who the people were just by their voice.
But that's true. But most of the book is actually word for word pulled from the if there's a section of Dr. Annixter with Elise Gifford, it comes directly from the tape. So there's a lot of oohs and ahs and, I can't quite see this. Well, it's not coming in clearly. They don't want me to tell you. So what I managed to do and what anyone would do is to take the significant pieces of the tape where they actually give information. And that's what's, very elemental to the book.
Okay. Up on the message board, Matthew is asking, did the wife ever do a polygraph test after she gave birth?
No.
She never did?
No.
Is that something that you have tried to get her to do?
No. Actually, we carted them off from California to Washington, D.C. for a week, then to South Carolina for a week. Did hours and hours and hours of taped and videotapes and whatnot. So really, when he passed the test and when the two doctors came up with their conclusion, one, that they're not neurotic, they're not psychotic, and Vitone actually said they're suffering from post-traumatic stress, much as a POW would.
Wow.
Sexual dysfunction, insomnia, paranoia, etc. So it just didn't seem, important, to tell you the truth.
Okay, so outside of yourself and the two doctors, how many people that know them closely know about this story?
I can't say. Obviously I can't say because I don't live with them moment to moment. But it's a small number. And I can tell you that their parents, obviously, two of their children, the older ones, and the mutual friend that we shared. So those would be the people that I'm aware, outside of the two doctors and myself, that would know about this. And
can you? Well, I have like two questions. I don't know which one to ask first, but I wanted to find out how you were introduced to them to begin with. And I am going to forget the second question, so go ahead and answer that.
Yeah, this was a fellow that worked for me. I mentioned that I was an executive CEO of this company. We had about 150 salespeople in the Americas. So he was a salesperson in California, and we got to be friends. He was a bright guy, just a very personable fellow. So we got to be friends. He knew I was a writer, and he had played college football with Tom Gifford, who was an all-state football player in college, and they were best friends. So he knew how terribly these people were suffering and how morbid, their life had become due to this and holding it in. And he thought from my side it was a great story, and from their side it would be maybe cathartic to tell it. I originally didn't want to do the story because I said I don't do that kind of thing. I mean, I'd written some books on business. I'd written some spy novels and some True Detective stories and things like that. Actually, for True Detective magazine, and had a series that I was working on, fiction. But this was not something that was really appealing to me. But once I heard the story and the depth of it and the breadth and how sincere these people were and how it had affected their lives, I just felt like I didn't think there was a story that I'd ever heard that had this scope and expanse and the detail and specificity that this did. And so I wrote it.
Now, let's just say this situation, I do want to talk about the craft and all that in just a minute, but just say this whole situation happened, and I can't imagine how horrified they both were. What do you do the next day? What did they do the next day?
Yeah, actually, they debated whether they should tell their parents. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what they did the next day. The next day, they slept a long time, that too, and they compared notes. The next day, they, I guess, debated how to approach their parents, if they should approach their parents, if this was something they should just keep to themselves entirely. What never came up was, can we exploit this in some way? Because this guy had an important job, and by the way, struggled. Nothing seemed important to him after this. So working, a shopping mall, constructing a shopping mall was the furthest thing from his mind. All these things are dwarfed by the hugeness of this of what they'd experienced.
Right. We're getting a little bit of background noise here. Are you up next to your mic?
Actually, I'm wearing a headset.
It is a headset. Okay.
Yes.
All right. I'll quit talking about that. I already got teased on the chat room about that. Okay. So they came forward and did tell their parents. And how did their parents take this story?
Well, I mean, I have to say, probably better than my parents would have. They were very understanding, and because, they could tell that over the weeks that had gone by, so let's say it took them 3 weeks to get up the nerve to sit down and discuss this, they could see that they hadn't slept, that they looked terrible, that they were distracted, and so they were empathetic to all of it. But, of course, the first thing they say, well, maybe, there's a desert warfare exercises that go on and this and that. And, Tom, who, again, was a bright guy and knew about guns, knew about weapons, knew about a lot of things like that, said to me, do you think that I wouldn't know the difference between a military exercise and this? He said, the craft I saw, no military could ever contemplate. What we saw is beyond the pale of any military. And you just have to believe that. And so, I mean, maybe you have kids, and maybe you could. So maybe somebody says, and again, these were very, very straight, religious sort of people, coming from that kind of background, and so drugs obviously comes up. LSD, for example, peyote or mescaline, or even botulism, maybe from a bad can of beans or something like that. But the psychiatrist discounted that, because if they were hallucinating, let's say with LSD, just for one of another scenario, they would not be hallucinating the same things.
Right.
They'd be off on their own tangents built from their subconscious. So it's impossible that if you took LSD and I took LSD, moment to moment, we'd be seeing the same things, comparing notes like this as they did.
Uh-huh. Now, did the next day when they woke up, you said they slept a lot, which you actually do hear a lot about people that are claiming that they were abducted. They always seem to sleep a lot the next day. I don't know if you've ever heard that before or not, but did they think to report this whole thing to the authorities, whatever authorities would be?
I'm sure that was something that they debated the next day and days after that. But if you look at the scope of this story, I just don't think there was evidence. And if there was, let's say that this thing was tracked on radar, it's not the kind of thing somebody's going to say, "Oh, you're right. That day there was this on the radar screen." I don't think it works that way. I think the way it works, even when a guy like Jimmy Carter, former president, or Ronald Reagan, former president, talks about a UFO, which they have, or the governor of Arizona, for example, during the Phoenix Lights, actually now comes out, after he's out of office, and says, "My son and I saw a UFO that was the size of a football field, the size of a city.
Yeah. And
it floated over our heads while we were in a park." But while he was governor, he actually ridiculed those people, kind of made fun of them.
Right.
And so I think there's just no great benefit. I think when you really analyze it, and it's you and your life and your reputation and your family, I think the second conclusion you come to is, let's just keep this to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people, I could understand that totally. Another question up on the message board is, what is the main thing learned about the alien agenda?
Yeah, that's really a great question. And in these transcripts and in the book,
and you can go ahead and read. It's just that I'm not big on a lot of excerpts.
I can talk to it.
Yeah.
But the exact words are very, very precise. But she talks about the 5 galaxies. She talks about unification. I actually ask her while she's hypnotized. The doctor let me ask a couple questions. What is the agenda, and when will they make themselves known? And she came up with this when the things that matter to us stop mattering and start mattering to them. But beyond that, she says, I say, when will this happen? And she goes, I don't know. And then I say, well, in my lifetime? She goes, in your children's. In your children's lifetime. So my gut take, what I take out of this, because even afterwards, I did a little research then on the Mojave Desert. And in the Mojave Desert are these ground drawings of the Mojave Twins that can only be seen from high up. And also in the caves around there. And they call them the Mojave Twins. The Paiute Indians drew them, and I saw pictures and I almost fell out of my chair because it was exactly the illuminated beings that the Giffords talked about.
Well, let's hear details on the beings.
Yeah. Illuminated?
Yeah, sure. There were a few different types.
Yeah, there were almost a realm, like a hierarchy. So this is the way it went. There were these gremlin-type beings that were rough, that were malevolent, leather-faced, vicious, fierce eyes, red eyes. And these things were like rambunctious children, but malevolent. And they were running around all over the place. There were these two holographs or whatever that were electrified so they couldn't get out of the camper. So were these beings? No, they were a kind of device. Then there were the illuminated figures, and the illuminated figures were about 5 feet tall, maybe 5 feet 5. She describes them as about her height. White, translucent almost, with large eyes, with 2 holes for nose, a slit for a mouth. And when they looked in their eyes, they said it didn't have parts like ours did. It was like it just went straight back like cones into blackness. And also, there was a last type, and this was what really makes the story, I guess, strange and significant in many ways. When everything is going crazy and these people are thinking they're going to have heart attacks and die in the back of the camper, they thought they were in hell. So a kind of mist would come into the back of the camper and soothe them, and they'd feel their heartbeat go down, they'd feel their pulse rates go back down, and they'd stop hyperventilating. They wanted to keep them alive, clearly. But there was a moment when things were incredibly chaotic, when mayhem broke loose and these little beings are jostling around the camper and in trees. The searcher is combing the desert basin. These illuminated figures are putting them through hell mentally. And all of a sudden, an angelic presence, clearly feminine, they say, a swirling sort of motion, and a feminine presence like a woman, says, "Don't worry, this will be over. This will not last forever. You know, be calm, be comforted. This will cease." And they called that being, just again between themselves, the Comforter. But it really was a lot like people would describe a Marian visitation, maybe at Fatima, Lourdes, something along those lines. But there was a clear order to this. And the order would be something like the illuminated figures were scientists, very clinical, no emotions whatsoever. The malevolent beings, go figure, they called them gremlins. The angelic presence, something else again. On the ship, when they did recover memories from being on the ship and being examined, Elise Gifford cried. Tom cried. I don't know what they want. I don't know why they're staring at us like this. They're putting their fingers over my body. They're putting probes over my body. Tom had a device inserted in his anus, and she as well. So these were not pleasant experiences, and these were scientific experiments.
Wow. When this was going on, this was all the stuff that they were not conscious of, and they had to regress to find all this stuff out?
Well, no, actually, the illuminated beings and the gyrations they went through in the back, that was conscious. The gremlin beings, conscious. The spacecraft itself, conscious. The searcher, that seemed to be mining minerals from the desert basin, conscious. They had vague memories of lights and going up into the camper, the whole ground being sucked up into the craft, into a kind of holding chamber where there were other kinds of beings. And they had vague memories of that. And in dreams, it would start to come out. But it was very unclear. And when you'd ask them, they'd say, it's there. I just can't get at it. And that's what inspired the retrogressive hypnosis.
I see. Now, did they spend a lot of time in the Mojave?
He did. His father was a hunter and his brother was a hunter, so they would go hunting in the Mojave for mule deer, for example, and quail and things of that nature. Now,
were they aware of those drawings you were talking about before?
I wasn't. They weren't. I wasn't. No, I just came upon it. Sometimes you see these books, the 7 Wonders of the World or something along those lines. So I was in a doctor's office, and I look at this, and like I said, I almost fell off my chair because I'm saying this is exactly what these people are talking about.
Oh, wow. Now, a question that comes up all the time when it comes to abductions is, do you happen to know their blood type?
No, I honestly I don't. No.
Yeah.
Never came up.
It would be interesting if one of them or both of them were Rh negative, just to keep, you may want to make a mental note of that and see if you can find that out. Because there is some type of connection. It seems to be that way. And Nick Redfern has written a book on that very subject. He was a guest a while back. And there's someone else that's our listener in the chat room that has been looking into this quite a bit. Let's see. There was another question up here. Did the couple have contact other than the desert?
You know, that's a great question. And the answer is yes. Tom Gifford, when he was 8 years old, and this is one of the reasons it was so also terrifying to him when he was 8 or so, he was fishing with a friend. And they thought they saw an object, a UFO. So they looked, and, typical of these things, well, that's a shiny object, and it gets closer and closer. Then they get scared, and the two kids drop their fishing rods and start running. And he had some missing time then, but he always remembered running, and he always remembered running away from this UFO that seemed to be tailing him, and having missing time. So when he saw this happening, you can imagine, 25 years later, it just sent chills down his spine.
Now, the book comes out. Has that changed their life at all? Are they keeping like a really good finger on the pulse of how this book is doing and how it's being accepted? And the next question is, have they listened to any of your interviews? No,
I don't think so. I think, like I said, this was something that happened in 89, 90, 91. That's when I did a lot of this. And I did a version of it that I wasn't particularly pleased with. It's a tough story to put together as a writer, I have to say. And so they were thrown into the arms, I think, of the Mormon Church. I told you about the trauma, the post-trauma that they went through. And I think it had a lot to do with them becoming devout Mormons for a period of time, a number of years, and moving to Salt Lake City. Since that time, more recently, they are not active with the church, but I think it provided a sort of sanctuary for them in times when you're trying to discern what's real and what isn't.
Right. Now, what were your thoughts about the possibility of alien abduction beforehand?
I mean, I would say I looked at it as interesting. It's certainly a fascinating and interesting topic, but I can't say that... and I never felt that people were crazy or that sort of thing. I thought there were misunderstandings that could go on. And I also thought, and again, maybe not the kindest thought, but I thought that sometimes people look at the world and it seems not as hopeful and maybe kind of depressing even. And these were kind of fantasies that maybe were escape routes for some people.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a basis of a lot of conspiracy theories and the doomsdayers and all that. It is life can be trying, and sometimes people are looking for ways to get out of their head, more or less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think something like that.
Yeah. Now, you've written fiction and nonfiction. By the way, this is based on a true story, but this is basically more or less transcripts. Is that right?
No, this is why I say it's a true story. Okay, so there's nothing in here that isn't factual. But what I had to do, just for dramatic reasons, is to take chronology and move it around a little bit, just just for dramatic reasons, just for continuity. Life doesn't happen like a novel, or life doesn't happen like an article. And so while the facts aren't changed, what I did have to do was to move chronology around a little bit, and just so that it was more digestible. So, but it's a true story, and what I did try to do is write it like a novel, so that it had impact, and you captured the emotions that went on, beneath the surface in terms of the relationship with their kids and their parents and things of that nature.
I imagine this would be trying for any couple to go through on their relationship, for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. When you were interviewing them the first time, how long did it take them to come out with everything, basically?
Well, everything wasn't everything. It came out, and this is what makes it, So if you think about people talking about a story, let's say not a well-burnished story, that for years you've sort of told this story, but a very complicated story, which this is, because it's like, again, an exposure of a world, not an incident. And so they would tell a piece of it, and this is where the chronology came in. And I said, well, exactly when did that happen? I mean, what time was that? And was this before, with your parents? Was it 5 days later or 3? So it took a lot, and I had to really look at the tapes, and I had maybe 30, 40 hours of tapes, and then the videotapes and whatnot, and see how these things came together. Do you know what I mean? Because what people talk about is what's most traumatizing to them.
Right. Well, let's talk about the craft and what their experience or what they recalled from going on board, how they went on board, what happened, and all that.
Yeah. Well, basically, they talk about almost the entire land that they were on. This is the way it felt. Now, whether this was real or not, I don't know. They don't say this is what happened. This is what they say it felt like. What it felt like was that a section of the earth had been cut out around them, and they had been lifted into the craft, camper and all.
Wow. And
they even talked to each other while it was happening and said, do you feel this? The desert is the same, but I feel like we're being lifted, and it's colder. And so that was one of the last conscious memories they had.
I see. I usually break at the. I went a little longer. I usually take a quick break at the top of the hour, so the 1 hour listener gets a little extra in this show. So we're going to take just a quick music break, and we'll be right back. So just hang in there, Ron. Don't go anywhere.
You got a deal.
Okay, we'll be right back. All right, we're on with Ron Felber, and we will be actually taking calls. If anyone wants to call in, you can dial in at 603-967-4030, or you can actually Skype if you'd like, and that's just at Marty Willis, MartyWills. Yes, it is. I don't even know how to spell my own name. So.
Say, Martin, you had asked, and I know we're not big on reading transcripts, but you asked about them being taken into the craft. Would you mind if I just...
Yeah. Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
So this is Tom Gifford, again, under hypnosis. I see bright, blinking lights. I'm on my back, encircled by people looking at me. I see their outlines in the light, strange shadows, but it's so bright. I'm fighting and resisting them in the camper. Elise is grasping for my hand as she's being pulled away. They're white all over, and I'm fighting. I want to remember things about that, but the memories don't seem concrete. Bug eyes, Elise screams. Say more. It's one of the white ones, she said, perplexed. Then in a panicked voice, can't move. I'm just scared. I want to go home now. Long fingers. There's 3 around my face, almost touching but not touching. What's on the other side of the fingers, Annixter asked. Light, white light. I remember this hallway, all lit up in blue lights, even in the ground. I guess I'm walking, but it doesn't feel like I'm walking. It's like a tunnel, long, no room, just a long tunnel of blue lights until finally there's an opening. Who are you with? The white guy. Where is your husband? I don't know where he is, she moans. I can feel him in my mind, though.
Hang on just one second. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, not at all. Not at all.
We have someone that just Skyped in, and looks like Jaffe. How are you, Jaffe? Or caller, you might be using a different screen name. Caller, you're on the air. You have a question for Ron?
Hello?
Hello there. You're live.
Hi, Martin. How you doing? I have a question about the episode in the camper. How long were they in the camper while the aliens were, creating mayhem? He said that gremlins and aliens going around.
Yeah, 8 hours. It was again a sustained period of time, and if I estimated from when they got there and woke up the next day, probably something like 6 hours.
6 hours? Because you described that they got more or less gassed at one point to remain calm.
No. When things got so intense, and they thought they were in hell. When things got so intense and their pulse rates were beating and they were hyperventilating, a kind of mist would fill the back of the camper, like something that to anesthetize them, so that their pulse rates came down and they didn't die.
Wow.
Okay, so when that happened, that was only like a short-term reduction of their anxiety.
Exactly.
Because you described that, and then you described someone that they called the soother.
The comforter, yes.
The comforter, okay, that's what it was. So I was just wondering why the aliens would need 2 different ways to keep them calm during the whole event. You would think that they would have them under control,
Well, they did. I mean, if you think about it, they did. They wanted to get their raw emotions. They wanted to get their raw feelings and their feelings of terror. What does a human being experience when they're terrified? What terrifies them?
Now I understand. Okay.
So this was a way of keeping them alive. Yeah, this was a way of keeping them alive so they could be experimented on further.
Okay, so basically they didn't want them sedated, but they wanted them under control. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, that's it. Well, thank you.
All right, caller. Thanks for calling in.
Okay.
All right. So, Ron, I'm sorry we interrupted that little excerpt you were reading. I don't know if you kept your place or we want to move on here.
I did, but I mean, there's just like I said, some very interesting, I think, descriptions of the beings that that you don't hear very often. But here's one: the being is 4 feet tall. He wears a white luminous uniform with an upturned arrow on the chest. He has no facial features, no mouth or lips, only slits. He passes directly through the wall. He stands behind the headboard. He stays there, passes 3 long fingers over Elise's face. Over and over. Tom can only see the hand. He opens his eyes, and directly above him is the face of the white being. You're dreaming, he hears the voice say. Then he looks to Elise's face and sees the burn marks its fingers have left.
Burn marks. Now, did she actually have those checked out?
Well, what happened was she awakened and looked in the mirror and just had a fit. Just went hysterical. He took photographs of the burn marks, and they didn't develop. They were blank.
Wow. How about that? So, okay, getting back to the craft. So they're on the craft. They are sort of telecommunicating between each other.
Well, I mean, she says, I felt as if I knew what he was going through, and he knew what I was going through. Now, again, that could be, they were separated, pulled apart, literally trying to hold hands while they're being, pulled apart. So whether it was true telepathy or whether it was just the fact that they intuited that if this was happening to her, this was happening to him.
I see. And so you said that this was back in 1989, but things continued up until 1991?
Well, yeah, at least that long. But yes, I mentioned about the child was spinning in the room. And I mentioned the fact that when Elise got pregnant, she was convinced that these beings were in the room watching.
And how about today? What do they talk about anything still ongoing?
I think at the end of it, a lot like, and this was Dr. Vitone's analysis, it's like a POW. These things just don't go away. And so you could say that when they hear a creak in the house, or when they hear pipes, plumbing in a house making noises or this or that, they would be very prone to say this has something to do with their alien abduction. So how much reality there is to that or not, I couldn't say.
Right. Now, so the thing that I think about in a situation like this is I still keep going back to the fact that someday we want to be able to see these people and see who they are. Mm-hmm. And how much of that have they talked about? Like, did they say, well, maybe someday, or are they saying, well, we'll definitely come out with this at some point? Because it's a well-written book by you. You seem to have tried to cover all the bases as far as polygraph tests and having different, doctors check them out, things like that. But I'm sure you realize the fact that everybody wants to know who these people are, and as far as a credibility factor goes, until people can actually talk directly with these people, there's going to be a lot of people out there that are going to say, nice book, interesting, but I don't believe it.
Well, they can talk to the doctors.
They can talk directly to the doctors. Excuse me.
But at the end of it, I'll tell you, this is kind of the way it is. And I think, who is this fellow, Travis?
Walton?
Walton. I think, from what I understand, he came out with this and then really just went underground for a long period of time. Mm-hmm. I think of it like this. If you go to a bar and somebody's talking about their experiences in war and sort of bragging about this or that, there's a very good chance that person never did that. Because people that were really in war and people that really saw the horrors of it never talk about it.
Right.
They want to forget it. Mm-hmm. And I would say that this is a lot like that. They want to move on with their lives. They don't want to be the UFO alien abduction couple.
It seems to me that they have, if all this is true, though, that they have something important and that may or may not need to get out there, depending on. They're saying that something's going to happen within your child's lifetime, correct, or something like that.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Did they say exactly what is going to happen?
A communication, yeah, a meshing of the cultures.
And are they talking about the cultures that they are aware of?
Yeah, I think so. By the way, they talk about again. This is in the transcripts in the book, but basically they talk about hybrids. Are we visited regularly? Yes, by a particular kind of being. By hybrids, by many different kinds of beings.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just trying to think. Did we cover everything about the craft itself?
I have a description of it, but I mean, basically what you could say is it was enormous. He says it domed the entire valley. And the closest thing, being a football player, I guess this makes sense, it was bigger than a football field. And by the way, it had 6 other crafts that were sort of miniature versions of the mother craft that were hanging from beneath it. It had a beam that was about 200 feet or so in diameter that it was shooting down and picking things up and putting things back down in, that they could see this, happening.
Wow. Well, interesting. Now, have you talked to other people that are doing research, like, for instance, David Jacobs or anyone like that about this?
No. As a matter of fact, as I say, this is not a alien abduction or UFO writer. This was a story that I found to be too compelling to pass on, and I did the best I could in researching and in putting it together. And so, of course, I read what I could on the topic, but it's not like I'm in chat rooms with people about this topic.
Mm-hmm. How closely do you? I mean, this. I'm sure this whole situation has changed your life, I would think, if you totally are believing their story.
Yeah, but it's funny. A lot of people, this doesn't faze. They would assume this. Do you know what I mean? They would assume that. I mean, look at religions, for example. I mean, if you told a Catholic that there was a Marian visitation, which, I mean, for an outsider is pretty spooky and strange, right? They'd say, of course there are Marian visitations, If you said that, that an angel appeared to a born-again Christian that really, or to a Muslim that was a true believer, they'd say, of course angels appear. Do you see what I mean? So the idea of another existence or a parallel universe or many universes, I mean, this isn't something so far-flung to a lot of different kinds of people. They just describe it differently.
Mm-hmm. So, moving on, are you in touch with these people currently, or because this happened quite a while ago? You met them fairly soon after this, like within a few years. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. And so, we exchange emails on occasion. Like I said, they really became, I don't like to use words like hermits or things like that, but they really got off grid. And, were in the bosom of this church for quite some time, and just lived a different life, a very simple life, a very, basic life, and a very religious life.
What did they say about your book after they read it?
They liked it. I mean, they thought it was well done. They, I think, looked at it from a more religious standpoint later than when they first read it. And so, and certainly you could impose on this a very strong religious point of view. I mean, you have an angelic presence, you have a demonic sort of presence. So there is that. The question for me would be and this is what I think these things, these images were kind of in their heads. And if someone was a scientist and trying to extract emotional responses, I think I would use experiences that they really had and traumas that they really had and a language that they really had. And so to these people, angels, demons, these kinds of things were ways to evoke horror or comfort. And I think they were, incredibly manipulated mentally. And yeah, sure, tortured mentally to extract information about how humans think, what their mental makeup is, how their emotions work, things like that.
Mm-hmm. And did they happen to know if other people were being treated similarly? Other people were Like, for instance, were there the only two people that were connected with on this visitation?
Yeah, actually, they went that day to another campsite. So there were other people camping, a couple of older people, and of course they beat around the bush. They were going to ask them, "Did you see aliens last night or a giant spacecraft?" They said, "Did you see anything strange in the sky?" And the woman who was making coffee that morning said they went to bed early that night. They ate dinner and went to bed at early so they could get up and do whatever they were going to do. But so that was the extent of it. But no, there were no other. This was really a very deserted area of the desert.
Wow. All right. Well, Ron, this is going to do it for the show for us. We have another guest coming up here, and it's been a real pleasure, Ron.
I enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
And let's talk about your website and where someone can get that book.
Yeah. My website is ronfelber.com, so that's easy. The book is Mojave Incident, and you can pick it up at bookstores or Amazon. I would ask that if somebody, listeners, buy it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble on the Internet, that they do a customer review and let me know and let other people know what they think of the book and the story.
Sounds great. All right, Ron. Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Martin.
All right. So hang in, everyone. We're going to be connecting with our next guest here, and that is Lee Spiegel. So hang on. I am not seeing his contact here. Live radio. You got to love it. Well, while I'm waiting, if anyone would like to call in and say hi, talk about a UFO experience, talk about our last guest, what you thought, I am going to type this contact in and try to get it going here. Hang on, everyone. We have someone calling in. Hello there, caller.
Hi. Yes, Ray Stanford. Wonder if I might talk to Morton.
Hey, Ray. How are you? Thanks for calling in. You saved me right now because I'm trying to get a contact request going here, and I just found it. So good to talk to you, Ray. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah. Oh, well, if you've got Lee on there, I probably better sign out, hadn't I?
No, Lee's not on yet.
Okay.
I'm trying to add his.
I wanted to make some comments. Now, I read the Mojave incident from front to back completely, and I want to say, and with no animosity to anybody or the author, but that's one of the worst books I've ever read. In the first place, the first three-quarters of it reads exactly like an extremely poorly written Z-grade movie script. And it does, in fact, say at the front of the book that it is inspired by a chilling story. It doesn't say it is the word-for-word fact. And it goes into every kind of incredible, tawdry detail of imagination between the man and the woman, and every soda they pop by brand, and every puff of anything, a can being pulled open. I mean, it's not ridiculous. But the statement that he made, that if people are on drugs, they do not share hallucination, is quite false. In fact, in the late 60s and early 70s, I talked to numbers of people who were, in fact, acid heads. And if these people are isolated from each other, they're not going to share hallucinations. But this woman and this man were in the same camper together. And each one is talking about what they're seeing. Well, when you are triggered by either psychosis or psychosis inducing drugs, you can get to getting into what the other person is talking about. It's happened many, many times. And I'm not against abductions, but it sounds to me that these people had read almost every book that's available at the time, from the anal probe on down or up. And it just, in my opinion, carries no credibility as a credible abduction. You and I know both that, you know that I fully am aware that abductions occur. And I talked to the son of an Air Force general who was the first person that I know of that was ever abducted in 1956 in the desert of New Mexico. And I have no doubt that this happened. He described it long before. He described it to me in the summer of 1956. And so I'm not trying to put down the idea of abduction or mysterious things. One final thing I would mention, 5 galaxies. This lady talks about them in the book as if they were talking about local bridge clubs in one small community in California or somewhere. I mean, a galaxy is hundreds of millions of suns and potentially planets. You don't have 5 galaxies as units coming together and having little councils and so on and so forth. It doesn't work that way. The suns are of diverse ages in galaxies, and some are spinning right into the middle of the black hole. And it seems as if the lady talked about galaxies as if she didn't even know what they are, doesn't have the slightest concept of what they are. And there's nothing that I read in the book that is credible at all. And he implies in the book that this is a valid story because these 2 doctors said that these people were not psychotic. I'm sorry. That has nothing to do with the question of what was happening. And certainly if they stated that you don't hallucinate common things, but when you're in a room together and talking about what you think you're seeing, that is absolutely wrong. And anybody who's really talked with people in that field will tell you that that is incorrect. So that's what I have to say about it.
All right,
hey, save your money.
Ray. Okay, Ray, someone just said they love you in the chat room. Can you hang on just a minute? I'm going to try Lee. I'm not sure if this is going to work.
Okay, I'll hold it.
And if Lee doesn't connect, then how long ago did you get the book? Because it just recently came out, right?
Actually, I ordered it about a month before it came out, and so I probably got it the first day that Amazon.com had it. I've had it now for, I think 2 or 3 weeks. I read it within the first day and a half of when I got it.
Ah, okay. All right, so let's see. Let me just try one more thing here with Lee.
Earth to Marty. Marty.
Yeah, I think we lost everyone. Can you call me back on this in just 1 minute? I have to get everyone back.
Okay, you want me to call you on Marty Willis?
Yeah.
I'll do my best. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
We're back. So sorry about that. Okay, everyone, we're on the air, and we did get a hold of Lee, but at the same time, everyone dropped out, including this network. And I'm sorry, this is live radio. It's just one of those things. I need someone in this studio with me. Sometimes it's just it's rather difficult to do. Lee is going to call back. I hung up accidentally on Ray and, of course, the network here. So Lee will be calling back any minute. Hello, Lee. Can you hear me? There you are, right?
I'm right here.
Wow, and your mic sounds really good.
So does yours.
People that do this for a living, it's always good to have them on.
That's true.
Welcome back, Lee. We just had Ray Stanford on. You and I were chatting, mentioned him the other day, and yeah, Ray was on, and he was basically giving his opinion on the last guest in the last book. Not so good.
But who was that guest in the book?
You can always count on Ray for a good, honest opinion. That was Ron Felber on the Mojave incident.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that book or with Ron.
Well, he's kind of making the rounds on different shows, and it has to do with a couple that was in the Mojave Desert and their account of quite an amazing abduction, if any of it is real. So let's talk about what's going on with you. And also, you sent me some artwork. Do you want to talk about that, too?
Well, a couple of weeks ago, I can't believe it's been 2 weeks already, since I was in Southern California at the annual MUFON Symposium. And one of the things that I was really looking forward to while I was there was my friend Dale Hendrickson, who is one of the long-term illustrators of characters on The Simpsons television show. And he's also a very, very popular UFO aficionado. He draws and illustrates and paints beautiful outer space scenes. And he's been going around to some of the UFO conferences to sell his paintings. about a year ago, I told him about my encounter from 40 years ago. I'm celebrating my 40th anniversary now, as is Travis Walton, who also had an amazing encounter 40 years ago. And so I told Dale about the encounter in North Carolina, where I was surrounded by sheriff's people, highway patrolmen, police officers, and we watched as this craft approached us from across the field at night. And when it got close enough to us where the lights below it could actually illuminate the structure itself, we could see that it was a triangular craft. And now back in 1975, we hadn't heard much about these kinds of shapes. It was,
right.
Mostly circular crashed UFOs. No, we didn't have a lot of crashed UFOs. we can always hope, right?
Yeah.
When astronomer J. Allen Hynek first called me and asked me to go to North Carolina to check this out with him, I told him I was disappointed that he was sending me to see a flying Dorito, essentially. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He said, look, if you don't want to go, I can find someone else. I went, no, don't finish that thought. I'm going. When Allen Hynek calls you and asks you to go somewhere to investigate something for him, you go.
Right. Yeah.
Within a few hours of my arriving in the sheriff's department down in Lumberton, North Carolina, I hit the jackpot. And so I was telling Dale Hendrickson, this painter, the story about it. And last week or 2 weeks ago at the MUFON Symposium, he unveiled a painting of the biggest moment of the encounter. And it totally took my breath away because I had never seen it done like this in such a way that I would go over to it and go, yes, that's exactly what we saw. And you have this on your website now, I believe.
No, I'm going to put it up right now. So if anyone that's in the chat room right now, if you refresh the page, you won't lose. It'll sign you right back into the chat room, and you'll see some images that I just posted just this very now. Are what Lee's talking about?
When the craft was directly above us, it stopped. It hovered. It made no sound. It had no engine sound. Had a row of white lights up one side and red lights up the other. And at the apex, it had one bright light. And at one point, as we were all looking up at it, it shined this amazingly bright, hard-to-look-at beam of light directly down on the ground where we were. If you look at the painting that you've got there, Martin, the figure of the person in the middle who's got his arms outstretched, that's me.
You look younger there.
Well, that was 40 years ago. Come on.
And I was going to say thinner, but that would be mean. I wouldn't say that.
Well, you can't tell. It looked like I was wearing like a trench coat or a tunic.
Yeah. So let's talk about, you're going to be heading out, and I really wish I could go, but you're heading out November 5th out in the Scottsdale area, out in Snowflake.
Yes, it's on the actual date of the Travis Walton UFO abduction was November 5th, 1975. Just a few months after I was hit by a beam of light from an unknown craft, Travis was hit by a beam of light from an unknown craft, but in his case, he disappeared for 5 days. So I came away from my experience a little easier than he did. And so there's going to be this 40th anniversary conference called the Skyfire Summit. And it's his anniversary conference. And they're selling tickets now for this thing. And you can still buy tickets. There are going to be a lot of people there, we hope. And one of the first things that we're going to do I think on the first day there, the actual anniversary date, is everybody's going to get into some buses, and we're going to drive into the Indian reservation, into the forest, and go to the exact site where this took place in the forest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. He was there last year. It happened to fall on a Wednesday. Of course, it was the 39th, not the 40th. And so this will be really exciting. 40 years. It's hard to believe.
Yes. And if do you have up on your site the picture that shows Travis and me?
Yes, I do. So everyone, if you're listening live, you can just scroll down. Of course, if you refresh the page and you scroll down, and you'll see the picture of Travis and Lee together.
So we stood on both sides of the painting at the MUFON conference, and while I'm pointing at me on the ground, Travis is pointing up at the craft, and he's actually saying to me, while the beam was coming down at you, I was in the craft driving it.
So when this beam did come down, though, what you said it was brilliant light, and what did you feel anything? What was your experience with that?
If you've ever driven past a construction site where the men are doing welding and they're using these magnesium flares as part of their job, and if you find that they have to wear goggles and to protect their eyes, but if you're looking at it from a distance, the brightness from some of these flares is so bright that you really can't look directly at it. That's what this thing was like. It came right out of the craft, came down on the ground right in front of us, and couldn't have lasted more than 2.5 seconds, but it kind of seemed like an hour to all of us who were standing there. And then the beam of light went back into the craft. All the lights on the thing turned off. Then the whole thing turned kind of an amber color.
Wow.
And it turned in the sky very slowly, about 45-degree angles, and then it just started moving slowly off, as if to say, I'm done with you, jokers. I'm going somewhere else. And it did. I mean, we got into the cars, chasing it from little town to little town, and I kept coming on to different police officers and highway patrolmen, one police chief, who all gave me interviews to tell me of their encounter that they had just had with this thing. And there were so many police officers that saw it over several days. I didn't know this until a little over a year ago when a book came out all about triangular UFOs by David Marler. David has done the most definitive research into these kinds of sightings, and he told me, and put it in his book, our encounter in 1975 was the first multiple witness encounter of a triangular shaped object in America. And I didn't know that.
Wow.
So from a historical point of view, it's like, oh my God, it was an even bigger jackpot for me being in the middle of it all.
Right. Now, I'm going to have to ask you this because the thought is there was no such thing as, you said it happened in like 2 seconds, but no one ever talked about any possibility of missing time or anything like that?
No, everything seemed pretty consistent and pretty straightforward. It's not like we all looked at our watches to say, hey, what time do you get? Oh, I don't know. What time do you have? There was nothing like that. I was more concerned about whether or not the police officers had guns with them, because I thought it would keep me safe, and then I thought twice about that. Like, really, how safe would I be if there's something in this craft that's hungry and just wants to eat us?
Yeah. Now, was it making any type of noise at all?
Not at all. Completely silent. As it moved and as it hovered, just totally silent. And the only other sounds that we could hear besides our hearts leaping out of our chest were the nervous sounds of dogs and horses in the area, in houses around the field.
That's amazing that you actually went down there to see this thing and it showed up. What is the area and, the broad area, like how many square miles or whatever, were people seeing this in?
Oh, it covered several counties. It kind of happened in between and on 2 consecutive early weekends in April. I believe I went down there on April 3rd. And it was several counties in a very rural area. If I can remember, Lumberton is south of Fayetteville by about 30 miles, I believe, was the distance. So I had to fly from New York to Washington and then pick up another flight from Washington to Fayetteville, where someone from the sheriff's department picked me up at the airport and then drove me down to Lumberton. So it was, it was pretty rural, and they couldn't have been nicer. They just wanted somebody to help them try and figure out really what the hell this thing was that they were experiencing. It
always baffles me if something like this traveled, say, light years to get here. Let's just say that's what it is, or as one case, traveled light years to get here. Why it would stick around in one little area? And you hear this over and over again. It's really puzzling.
Well, you know what, Martin? I used to be puzzled by that too. I'm not anymore. You want my basic comeback to that? Listen. That was 1975. I've had 40 years of research and investigating this subject to modify my feelings about it and my opinions based on my own experiences, based on what people in the military and scientists have told me. And when people like yourself say, why do they seem to hang out in like rural areas? My response is, I don't know, and I don't care. I mean, really, I like to keep things really simple. A couple of years ago, my younger brother in New Hampshire was driving with two of his sons, my nephews, and they thought they saw some odd lights in the sky. And so they pulled off to the side of the road, and they get out of the car to look at the lights. And within a minute or two, my brother Jim said, "No, it's just an airplane. See the way it's turning? It's heading to the airport." They got back into the car, and my nephew Zachary said, "Daddy, why do UFOs have lights?" And Jim said to him, "That's a really good question. When we get home, why don't you call Uncle Lee in New York and ask him? Because he might have a better answer." And I've asked that question. People have asked me that question. It's a great question, because if we're talking about that some UFOs could be somebody else's spacecraft or extra-dimensional craft, like Stan Friedman likes to talk about, the nuclear physicist, that means they have a technology that's so far beyond what we have that they wouldn't necessarily need lights, because their craft probably have better built-in sensors. They could just totally travel around in total darkness and never bump into each other.
Yeah, that is actually, it's amazing sometimes what kids can come up with the best questions.
Sure, and lately my response really to that is, now I don't even say I don't know why they have lights. Now I say to people, the only logical reason to me that they have lights is for our benefit. They want us to see them.
Right.
I mean, think about that.
Yeah, exactly. We have just about 1 minute, Lee. So do you have any recent articles real quickly you want to talk about?
Well, let's see. I got a story up there now that we posted just a few days ago about how I've sort of taken issue with Professor Stephen Hawking. Yes, that's Stephen Hawking, and what a fool I am to try and criticize him, right? Lately, I mean, in the past few years, I believe he's been a little hypocritical. On the one hand, he's been saying for years, we should not send any messages. We should not try to contact any extraterrestrial beings because it could be disastrous for us. Look at how badly it turned out for the Native Americans when Columbus arrived in America.
Right.
So he's been saying this a lot. And yet, a few months ago, he completely supported, and still does, the Russian billionaire Yuri Milner has put together, he's put down $100 million for a 10-year, very focused, extremely interesting search for extraterrestrials. And Stephen Hawking is saying, yes, I'm part of this, and I think we should look for them.
Lee, I'm sorry, we're totally out of time here.
Okay.
It's been wonderful. Always great to talk to you, Lee.
Likewise. Thank you, Martin.
All right. So thanks, everyone. That's it for the show. And next week we have Norio Hayawaka and also Simon Sharman from England. He's going to stay up late and talk to us. I want to thank some people for helping out with the show. Keith Rowland for helping us with the live show. Peggy Shunning for managing the Facebook page. Remember to like us on Facebook for all the latest UFO news. We'll be back next week right here on the Dark Matter Digital Network. And see you, everyone. Keep your eyes to the sky.